Colleagues, with your permission, we will start. Everyone is ready. Thank you very much for coming. We welcome all of you. 3 years ago, all media agencies of the world published breaking news. Hundreds of bodies were found on the streets of a small Ukrainian town of Butscha, near Kiev, all of them with their hands tied. Most of the Western media outlets unequivocally and squarely blamed this massacre on Russia, and Butscha since then was deliberately and consistently turned into a symbol of Ukrainian martyrdom and alleged Russian brutality. This small place has become a quasi-obligatory destination for any foreign delegation visiting Kiev. In this propaganda exercise, all the blanks, false claims and discrepancies of the official version of events were deliberately disregarded. But let's ask ourselves a simple question. Do we know what really happened in Butscha 3 years ago? Do we care about the truth? It's obvious that as far as the Kiev regime and its Western backers are concerned, they definitely don't. And they don't want the others to ask these questions too. They feel quite comfortable in the bubble of lies about Russia, which they have been consistently inflating for at least 2 decades. And since the Butscha hoax is one of the core elements of this bubble, the West is aggressively resistant to any attempts to question the Butscha narrative. I have no doubts that today in their statements, our Western colleagues will label our meeting, quote, Russian propaganda and manipulation, end of quote, ignoring facts and testimonies that they will hear. That's their well-known tactics to ignore truth and uncomfortable facts. But as we all know, facts are stubborn things, and it's hard to dismiss strong evidence. Therefore, we intend to briefly revisit today the events of end of March, beginning of April 2022. First of all, it is important to recall the context of these events. As you all know, Russia started its special military operation on February 24, 2022. And by mid-March, Russian troops have advanced as far as outskirts of Kiev, including Butscha. But since we were from day one prioritizing a diplomatic solution over a military one, by that moment, bilateral Russian-Ukrainian talks on how to end this conflict proceeded first in Minsk and then in Istanbul. And by the middle of March 2022, our negotiators initialed a draft agreement which contained principles acceptable both to Russia and Ukraine. Given such a progress, as a gesture of goodwill, Russia took a decision to voluntarily withdraw from a number of northern regions of Ukraine, including the Kiev Oblast, where Butscha is situated. To give you an idea, we will show you a slide with 2 maps depicting the territory controlled by my country in Ukraine on March 15 and April 5, and you will see the difference. But as everyone knows today, these peaceful efforts were derailed primarily by our British colleagues who convinced Zelensky that if he rejects this peace offer and opts to fight for Western geopolitical interests, he will be able to defeat Russia with the economic and military support of the West. And the ambitious and narcissist Ukrainian president fell for the bait, thus making, as it is clear today, a fatal mistake for his country. But then everything looked different, and the task was to create an unbeatable pretext that could convince his countrymen and the international public opinion that agreeing on something with Russia was not an option. Here came this idea of a terrible false flag operation in Butscha, jointly implemented between April 2 and 3 by Ukrainian Special Services and MI6. Later, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson capitalized on the international outcry after discoveries in Butscha, and together with Zelensky announced in Kiev on April 9 that instead of signing an agreement with Russia, Ukraine will continue to fight, and the West will actively help it. And before that, our British colleagues who were presiding over our council in April 2022, in blatant disrespect to their mandate, rejected our request of the urgent meeting on Butscha provocation that we tabled as early as April 3. thus displaying their clear involvement in this provocation. This unprecedented disdain for the Council working methods is documented through our letter circulated as an official document of the Council. Colleagues, facts are indeed stubborn things, so let me briefly walk you through major discrepancies of the Butscha narrative. On March 30, 2022, following another round of talks in Ankara, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced the withdrawal of forces from several regions, including Butscha. On March 31, the Butscha Town Council released a video statement from Mayor Anatoly Fedoruk, who announced the liberation of Butscha and confirmed that there are no Russian troops in the town, without mentioning any mass atrocities, dead bodies, killings, graves, or anything of this sort. Let us show you the video posted by Mr. Fedoruk. As you will see, he appears happy and smiling. It is hard to imagine that he would act this way against the backdrop of an alleged massacre in the streets.
Друзі, шановна Бучанська громада, 31 березня віддав історію нашого населеного пункту всієї територіальної громади як день звільнення від російських орків, від російських окупантів нашими Збройними силами України, наших населених пунктів. Тож сьогодні констатую, що цей день є радісний і велика перемога наших Збройних сил на Київщині, і ми обов'язково з вами дочекаємося і будемо все робити для того, щоб велика перемога була по всій Україні. Слава нашим Збройним силам України, слава Україні, слава кожному українцю, незалежно від того, в якому куточку України він зараз знаходиться.
So it's March 31st. On April 2nd, 2022, the National Police of Ukraine shared footage on its Telegram Messenger channel showing Ukrainian special forces entering Butscha, which you see on the screen. The footage shows no dead bodies in the streets. The police personnel interviewed several people in different locations across Butscha, yet none of them mentioned any massacre or mass killings. The camera also captures broader areas behind these people with no dead bodies in sight. To sum up, for 4 days after the Russian military left Butscha, there was not a single sign of any atrocities. I repeat, not a single reference to it anywhere. There were also numerous images of photojournalists swarming around the streets of Butscha during these days, taking pictures on top of one another. The pictures themselves were rather standard for a conflict zone: burned military equipment and damaged surroundings, which is explainable since Ukrainian forces had been heavily shelling the town while Russian army was there. But what is missing on all these early photos of Butscha immediately after withdrawal of Russian forces are bodies and the signs of mass executions. Let me draw your attention in this regard to another infamous video that was posted by a certain Ukrainian neo-Nazi Serhiy Korotkikh, the leader of the Ukrainian territorial defense units that entered Butscha after the withdrawal of Russian forces. It depicts members of his unit discussing whether they should shoot people not wearing blue armbands, the sign indicating support for the Kiev regime. And you understand that these could be only civilians, as the Russian forces had left the town 4 days ago. The commander's affirmative response is clearly heard, permitting such actions. Although Korotkikh hastily deleted his video, copies remain accessible online.
Пацаны, без повязок, можно по ним стрелять?
Он так спешил, что аж заехал на кентап.
Это что?
Тупо.
So what we have just seen here is a selfie video of a renowned neo-Nazi who hates Russia and its supporters, giving a direct order to Ukrainian militants to shoot civilians without the blue armband, which perfectly explains dead civilians with white armbands or without blue ones in this area. If it's not a smoking gun, what is it? And then all of a sudden, shortly after the mentioned entry of Ukrainian forces, Ukrainian and Western media outlets circulated photos of several bodies in civilian clothes. What a coincidence after several days of silence about any signs of killed civilians lying in the streets. These images immediately raised multiple questions among experts. First, these were the same few bodies pictured from different angles, not hundreds or even thousands as claimed by the Kiev regime. Second, Ukrainian propagandists and Western media claimed that these bodies had been lying in the streets of Bucha since March 11. The weather in Bucha was hot at this time, but the bodies don't have any signs of decomposition. Moreover, they are not stiff, and there are wounds with fresh blood on some of them, which is explainable if they had been killed 1 or 2 days before. One more unexplainable discrepancy. The bodies were visibly dirty since it was raining heavily during these couple of days. Yet the cloth used to tie their hands was visibly pristine white. The only plausible explanation is that their hands were tied just before the photo shoot to support the political narrative. Last, but definitely not least, many bodies had white cloth around an arm or leg, a sign used by the Russian armed forces to identify friendlies. In contrast to the pristine ribbons tying their hands, these pieces of cloth were visibly dirty from days of rain, suggesting that people were wearing them at the time of death. It is also a known fact that Ukraine used a different sign, a blue cloth or tape, to identify their friendlies. Looks fishy, doesn't it? And if I add to this that there are witnesses on how this false flag operation was committed. One of them is the French writer Adrien Bocquet, who visited Bucha in April and witnessed this provocation unfolding, with bodies brought from different places and piled together on the roads to create the appearance of mass killings. He's joining us today to tell the story of events in Bucha. Please, Mr. Bouquet, the floor is yours.